was planning for this. So you're going to get my head item as well?
Yes.
Okay, right. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my master class on jazz solo improvisation. Of course, you know my name is Wayne Blake. The outline of my master class will consist of analysing melodic and chord progression of a jazz piece, exploring various devices to use when developing a solo improvisation, concluding with a band performance. My musical background is rooted in gospel music and started early 7 playing in my local church. And later on, in my teens, late teens, I was drawn to jazz, mainly because of the similarities between gospel and jazz. In other words, free expression, improvisation, and the ability to interpret a song the way that you want to interpret it. Now, for this evening, we'll be looking at Satin Doll, my arrangement of Satin Doll, which I did in January for my solo performance. I chose this piece mainly because of the simple melodic lines and chord progressions, and that allows me, the performer, or the performers to extract or develop their solo. The simple melodic line gives you room to breathe. Right, during this session there will be plenty of opportunities for anyone to ask questions. However, I ask that it's not too difficult. Anyway, let's move, let's move on. So what I'm going to do, for those of you who are not familiar with the Satin Doll, I'll just play the A section, just to give you outline of the melody, and then I'll play the B section. A section, and it's obviously it was done by Duke Ellington, 1953. And so I've kept some. I'm going to demonstrate the way you would have maybe performed it in 1953, and I've done my version is more of a modern twist. So. That's A section. B section. Twist on the even though I was going to do the original version that Duke Ellington did, I just put my personal touch on that. Right, so we've got the A and B section. Right, there's two types of improvisation, and the way I look at it is there's a motivic and a linear. I prefer the motivic because it's constructive on the melody line as a building block. And then it's just like the melody is developed from that. The linear tends to be long sentences, and I think sometimes when you do the long sentences of improvisation, you can lose your audience. So my approach really is I like the motivic. I'll give you an example. The way I see linear improvisation, for example, would be something like this. Long sentences. Whereas my motivic approach would basically take a melody line and develop my solo using the raw ingredients, the melody and the rhythms. For example, take this as the melody line. Okay, then I'll develop my solo from that. So forth. So my approach is really, I like the motivic. I will start with the chord progression of Satin Doll. I didn't outline it, I haven't outlined it at all. But Satin Doll consists of a lot of 2-5-1 chord progression. And if we look at the A section, it starts in C, modulates to D, G, and G flat major. The B section modulates to F, G, D flat, and then resolves back to the root C. I tend to base my improvisation not on the complete structure of A section or the verse section. I tend to take probably a couple chords and then loop it. So in my arrangement of Satin Doll, I only used the two first chord progression, which was D to the G7, so D minor to the G7, the E minor to the A7, and then looped it. So let's go back to that motivic approach. Right, so the first chord, as I mentioned, is D minor. And for a lot of D minor chords or minor chords, a scale that really goes well with that is the Dorian scale. So I'm playing D minor, and D Dorian scale would start on the E. Even though I've got a D minor chord on my left hand, I'm playing the G, 7th. I'm playing the G 11th there. I'll play G7. And playing the G7, I would use a G Maximilian scale. So I've got two scales instantly. I've got for D minor, I've got E Dorian scale. For my G7, I've got G Maximilian. Now, all these Dorian, Maximilian, Locrian scale. If you're not familiar with that, I'll just quickly introduce to the concept. We look at C major scale. From C to C would be C major scale. The Dorian means the second degree of a scale, so I'll start on D. So using all the notes from C major scale, you just play from D to D, but starting on the D. And the same with G Maximilian, even though it's all the notes from the C major scale, but starting on the G, and you play from G to G. Instantly, even though we do modulate to the D major, don't forget we've got D minor to G7. The same thing applies to the E minor to the A7. So playing my E minor chord, I would use F sharp Dorian scale. When I play my A7, I would play my A Maximilian scale. Instantly, we've got 4 scales. Now, for most improvisers, anybody that improvise, our favourite scale is really the pentatonic scale, which consists of 5 notes. I also use pentatonic scale. I think for me, it gives me breathing time, especially when you're soloing and you're running out of ideas. So another scale, one that I like, the one I would use over 2 chords, D and G chord, I would actually use the C pentatonic scale. C, D, E, G, A. There are inversions of the scale, but I'm just going to give you a basic outline of what it sounds like. So, playing the C pentatonic scale. It sounds beautifully. So, you've got all those different tonalities, textures, clashing notes, and not clashing notes, but you've got different tonalities. Each scale has its own identity. So we've got our scales. What do we do next? Well, I think as a performer, you can have all the scales in the world. It doesn't make you a musician, but it's how you apply it in your musical, in your performance. So I'm not going to talk much about rhythm, but as a performer, I do believe that using your body can assist you in creating that jazz feel that you're looking for. Yes, you can use badu. You can also use the triplet 1, triplet 2, triplet. But I think that's just as important as moving your body. And if you notice, when I do play, I do use my body to assist my groove or my rhythm. I just want, I'll just stop. Is there anybody like to ask a question at this point?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the Satindal,
Yeah.
left-hand chord is a D minor.
Yeah. D minor 7.
Right, got it. And then you're playing E to E in the right hand. You said
What?
the right hand melody is playing from E to E. You said it's playing.
Scale.
Right. No, you said that's a Dorian.
I think well.
Is it not a Phrygian?
It can be similar. Like I said, right. For example, it's D minor. It's D minor. You can look at D minor being the root.
Yeah.
So you play D Dorian. If I was playing in C and looking at it from that perspective, then it'd be Dorian, Locrian, Phrygian, Lydian. So it's like every scale has 2 names.
Yeah,
like,
I've got it. That's
so
fine.
C major will have like Ionian and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So it's just playing words. Right. Okay. So what we'll do, you can have a drink afterwards, Ken, as well. Right. I'm going to move on quickly. Where was I? Yeah. So I'm just going to give you examples. So a lot of times I'll use my body to assist me in my rhythm. So a good way to start off improvising is basically just loop 2 chords together and just play this scale on top. So if I'm playing D minor, using the do, see. If you notice, I'm nodding my head, and that moving my body, and that kind of assists me in the in my improvisation. So let's go back to this more typical building block. Right, okay, so let's start off. We've got the scales, we've got pentatonic scales. There are other devices that we can use. So I wanted to just introduce. So we're going to start again building that improvised solo. A lot of times I start in the center of the piano. That allows me to build, and the lower I get, the higher I get, can create tension and create movement in my music. And I'll demonstrate that later on. So basically I tend to do start with my melody line. Now the next stage is I've used grace notes. Grace notes actually enables you to sort of like change the melody but not give away too much. And it also it's like for a lot of guitarists and sax players, they can actually slide into the notes, can bend the string, which adds that bluesy effect. What I'm going to do is just start use it in that same manner, but I want to show you just by adding grace notes you can actually manipulate the melody. And I'll also be using some of the notes from the E Dorian scale as well. So instantly I'm just manipulating the rhythm, but trying to keep in the rhythm. I'm using rhythm from the melody, the original melody, and I'm using some of the grace notes just to give just to start my building block for my improvisation. So I'll just do it once more, straightforward. So you've got the grace notes going on. The next thing to do, you can then just incorporate in some of the chords, breaking the chords down and manipulating that with the melody line and the grace notes. So if I look at my left hand, I can take those notes and break them down rhythmically. I've got my root, got my root, my third, my fifth, and my seventh. For example, you can do something like this. Or you can do an arpeggio movement. Okay. So that's my next stage of my development. So let's start with my, and then another thing you can also begin to do is use trills. I use trills a lot because it gives me time to take a break in the middle of my solo. It sounds, you can sit there and say, what shall I do? So trills are quite good devices.
Shouldn't have told us that. Because now every time you go, no, he's thinking what to do next.
So I'm just going to do a quick improvisation, just outlining some of those techniques. So. Yeah, so it's quite good for using trills. Now, I've shown you all those different devices and the concept and how I did my satin doll arrangement with regards to my solo. I want to get the band on the bass. We've got Darren Williams and on the drums we've got Daniel Beckford. I'm just going to play Silent Night. I don't know why I chose Silent Night. It was just I just thought it would be a piece of music that everybody will recognise. It was Christmas. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just show it first of all. I'm just going to play it straightforward. Just a small segment of it. Straightforward. There's nothing to it. There's no expression. Now, even though I mentioned all the different devices that I use, dynamics is so important as well. You can shape your music as well by using dynamics and register. So what I want to do now, I'm going to take some of the concepts I talked about developing a solo or develop a jazz piece of music. I'm going to back to Saturn Wheel. Again, I will start in the center of the piano. You will see me move outwards on the piano. So I'll start quietly. I'm using closed chords as well. Some other device as well. There you see, you could hear the grace notes, you could hear the chords, arpeggio, you could hear some of the trills. It might not be, but you could hear the drills and the trills, and some of the rhythmic, melodic rhythms I use to extend the melody. This time I'm going to get the band, and then you're going to see that whole thing come together. Again, I won't be playing, I'll be playing comping, of course, my left hand, bass line will take the bass line, and then we'll just be giving rhythmic assistance. So again, you can hear all the devices I use. I'd like to give you an opportunity. Which one did you prefer? What do you think about it? Can anybody like to give me feedback? Which one did you prefer and why? Did it communicate to you jazz emotionally? What do you think?
Yes, they're just very different, so they're both in their own way. I don't really prefer one over the other. I was interested in the chords that you used in the second one, because you talked a little bit about chord voicing, but a lot of what you're doing was essentially chordal there.
Yeah, it was chordal. I mean, what I tend to do is double. So if I'm playing a D minor, like C major, sometimes I'll just double on the chords.
Double what?
Yeah, double the chords. The reason I'm not talking much about chords because it is important. And I think that to do it in an half an hour, it wouldn't be doing justice. But what I will be what I'll say about comping, regards to the style I use, it's called looking for the cracks in the melody in the performance. So, for example, like playing the beat. So I'm working between using rhythmic chords as a rhythmic devices when I do my improvisation against my melody. But the chordals, again, like I said, I'm extending the large bass C chord, but I'm extending by using 11s, 12s, and 13s. But a lot of time, I'm just usually use fourths as well. Fourths is another device that I use. Open fourths, if I give you an example, basically from C to F, and then B flat. And this chord is quite good to use for jazz. For example, if I use C as a pedal note, so what I tend to do is also use the fourth as a harmonic support from a melody. For example. Yes. So the chord, in regards to your question, the chords that I use are really extension of the C chord, C major sevenths, and I use open fourths as well.
So you've chosen two different tunes, obviously Satin Doll and Silent Night.
Yeah.
So in Satin Doll, there's a lot of 2B that goes from D minor to it's a kind of secondary dominance in a way, from D minor to the G, from E minor to the A. Fine. You never restate the tonic. Which is always good practice. Now in Silent Night, for me, you went back to the root. You talk about voicings, but it went back to the C major root too early. All right, in the bass. Yeah. So you went Silent Night, and then I heard the C root again, and my ear wanted anything but a C root. It certainly wanted an inversion. Or a substitution, because it was the bass and the piano. But I mean, the point is that it creates. I'm trying to think of the best analogy. If you go back to tonic roots, it's an unwelcome return. That's the point I'm making. It's a too early return
to the root,
a premature return to the root. When there should be something else, because otherwise, why have a root? Let's step a sort of tonic root. Save it to the end of the cadence.
I think basically really I wasn't much about the chord progression I was demonstrating. It's more about the improvised technique. I mean, if we could have changed it, like you said, we could have probably done changed it.
Yeah.
To the E minor. Go to the C.
Nice one. Yeah. Well, okay. So you've got that. So I just wonder why, because what you did was a bit more basic.
Yeah, because really it was basic, just demonstrating the improvised in terms of like what I have in mind, which was really the grace style, the chords and the register. But I clearly would say basically that was just really illustrating that.
I guess therein lies the danger of asking questions.
Yeah, I know.
You just want to demonstrate the soloing techniques and then move on to something else.
Yeah, I know. So what I want to do, right, you're going to hear all those devices I've talked about as the wind up the masterclass.
Cool.
And we're going to perform to you. Thank you for coming out tonight. I'd like to say big thanks to the guys as well. We're going to do Satin Doll.
Right, good.
My arrangement of Satin Doll, Mark UK. All right, okay.
Yay!
Well done.
So there's only 3 people here to clap. One of them's not clapping.
Thanks.
Well done. Well done.